It's almost universal, whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels, 18 wheels, no wheels. So many of us have a special memory involving a vehicle or a story about a car we've loved. Even if you can't tell a crankshaft from a drive shaft, I want to hear the story of the vehicle that moved you. I'm Blake Jackson, and this is Auto-Biography. Next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast, we were talking with Tom from the Pharoahs Car Club, and he recommended a number of people, and this was the first on the list. He said, this guy's amazing. He's got an extensive racing history, and he's actually a general with the Pharoahs in BC. He said, Rick Stewart is the guy you got to talk to. So, Rick, welcome to the show. Tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
Probably the biggest one that's had the biggest impact in that on me is my 1948 Ford F6 cab over COE rat rod truck that my daughter and I built.
Oh, I got to stop and tell you about the cab over engine. 1948, and a new sensation was sweeping the nation because they needed something that could get around buildings in a more maneuverable and safer sort of fashion. Ford started making these trucks with the cabs right over the engine, so you're that much closer to the front of the truck, and you could get around. It was a lot safer, and it was better for those tight turning radiuses. So there you go, new innovation, the cab over engine. Interesting though, for a while Ford was making the cab under engine, but many people died. So what was it about this one that you really loved?
Well, when about approximately 8 years ago, Rat Rod Magazine put out a builder's challenge, a build-off challenge, $3,000 budget, 30 days to build something from scratch. So my daughter and I entered it. At the time, she was 16 and I was in my 40s. I have had several workplace injuries and that have left me impaired and disabled. But my daughter's thinking, we could definitely do something like this because we've done lots of restorations and that on cars. She thought, you know what, let's get in there and let's do it. So we were in the build off, and we did the build off and that with everybody else, and we built this truck literally from scratch in 28 days for $2,900.
And how did it turn out?
It turned out really good in that we put it on a 1994 van, Econoline van chassis, 306 in it. We did all the suspension in it. We did all the we kept all the electronics and everything and the brakes and everything that were in the van, and we amalgamated it into the cab over. We built our own cab mounts. We did everything in our driveway. No shop, no tools, and no help at all.
And she was 16 at the time.
Yep.
Very proud of her, I bet.
Very, very proud of her. She's grown up around me doing racing and that with the NASCAR Canadian Tire Series here in Canada. We were actually in charge of the street stocks and sportsman class and that up here.
So as far as muscle cars, I mean, that's my bread and butter too. That's what I really love. Anything notable that you've owned in the past or wanted to own in the past?
First car was a 78 King Cobra Mustang 2.
Cool.
And I had that in high school. My second car was a 69 Yenko 427. But you got to remember, this was back when they were, Camaros were a dime a dozen back then and very easily found. Yeah. You couldn't find that same car nowadays.
Now, someone's going to be listening and saying, what's a Yenko? Can you just explain that?
Don Yenko was an automotive dealer in that down in the U.S. that built some supercars and that with the cooperation of Chevrolet and that. And he specified with 427s, and most of them had 4-speeds. There were very few that had automatics, but he offered them in Chevelles. The Corvairs actually had the Yenko stamp on that on them. Novas, Camaros, a lot of the GM muscle cars and that back in the late 60s and that early 70s and that had the Yenko badge and that on them. And it kind of made them a special car in that it took a $2,700 car up to a $5,000 car retail brand new.
You mentioned there was a backstory to that Camaro.
That car was purchased and that just outside of Calgary out of a barn, and that a woman had placed an ad online and that for the car, like on in the newspaper and that for the car to be sold. and they said, it just said Camaro for sale, and nobody really called her or wanted to look at it. A few people looked at it, but showed disinterest right away. It was in a barn. It was covered in hay. It was covered in um, chicken droppings and everything. It was in really, really bad shape. And that when I went to look at it, you couldn't even look in the windows. You didn't know what it was. It would have been in the barn for so long and it was just horrible. I made a deal with her. She said, you got to drag it out of here. You got to air up the tires and that, and you got to drag it out of here. And I thought, okay, well, I'll pay what you're asking for it, but I'm really taking a chance because I can't even open the doors. I can't start it. So it was loaded up and taken to school and began its process of finding out exactly what it was. And after a few days of that of scraping and cleaning and pressure washing and repeating the process over and over, I managed to get into to actually open the doors.
Huh.
And it when I saw the YSC in the seats, I knew I had something special. I
Yeah.
had to get that hood open
Yeah.
to confirm it. And it turned out it was the factory original 427. It had been purchased by a young man in Calgary and taken out to the farm, and he went to Vietnam and never came home.
Oh.
That was the life of the car. It was very, very important to keep the car, you know, preserve the car. Unfortunately, because I was 19 at the time and that when I wrecked it, I really didn't think I didn't honor that tradition of what that car really was.
For the time that you had it, though, I'm sure that you did appreciate it, and I'm sure that his
Oh,
mom
I love
was.
that thing.
Yeah, I'm sure she was glad to know how much
Yeah,
you appreciated it too.
yeah.
And I hope that anyone listening gets how special these cars are. Hearing about you finding one in a barn, I want to hit the back roads right now and start scouring farmyards myself. Do you think there's still those barn finds out there?
There is actually there was a Yenko Chevelle found, I believe, within the last 5 or 7 years, and that I just heard about. That it was a red one, and there's a shop down in the U.S. and that does restorations and that on these cars, and he actually found the missing Yenko Chevelle that everyone had talked about, but the car literally disappeared. It had hit a pole, it had hit a power pole, and the car literally disappeared. It was taken off the road and shoved in a barn and forgotten about. And then all of a sudden, the original owner of it passed away. The family found the car in his estate and said, okay, well, we need to find out, if someone can fix this up or do something with it, or they didn't have any interest in the car. And those are even rarer than the Camaros.
You mentioned that this car kind of disappeared, and there was a question as to where it was. And it's funny, I guess, like in any community, these urban legends appear. Have you heard of any missing cars, or I guess any car legends or urban legends?
I actually just met a gentleman yesterday that told me that there is a missing Bugatti within 1 hour of me
Oh,
that someone has. He has seen photographs of it in a barn. It's apparently in a very, very early Bugatti,
oh,
and it is supposed to be complete. And I thought, yeah, I'm not sure about this, but he was very adamant about it. He actually went home and then he messaged me back and said, I found the pictures. Do you want to see it? And I thought, if you've got the pictures, I don't want to see it because that's all it's going to do is intrigue my curiosity. But I do know that there is a gentleman in that's a half an hour away from me that has a factory original 1971 Challenger drag car. It's in his dining room. The
wow.
house was built around the car. The house was actually built initially, but he extended the kitchen and dining room to encompass the car, and then he built a garage beside it. I've seen the car. There's no VIN number on it. It was specifically built for Chrysler for racing.
So Chrysler made this. It said it's not even going to hit a dealership. It's straight to the track.
It went straight to the track, and this gentleman had owned it since '74, and it's still there. And I think it's only got 11 or 12 miles on it,
Oh my God.
and it's just straight. quarter-mile races. That's it.
And do you think it will ever leave the dining room?
When he dies, the family has sworn that they're going to cut the house apart and get rid of the car
Huh.
because they can't stand seeing it. It's sitting on cinder blocks in the house.
So is he just an eccentric kind of character?
Very, very.
What's a good way to get your kids interested in it? I imagine you talk to a lot of car people, and they're probably thinking the same thing. What do you recommend for someone who wants to pass this down?
My kids, both my kids, and that knew about all the interaction that we had going to car shows. Plus, I taught them to do the same thing. My son built his first bike. He took 3 BMX bikes and built a 8 foot long lowrider bike, and the frame was an inch off the ground. He'd ride that thing to school. He learned how to weld. He took pride in what he built at a very young age. So I can't express enough that the more they learn at a younger age, the better and greater appreciation that they'll have for it when they get older.
Well, that's perfect, and that's a big reason why I started this. I want those stories behind it, and I want them all passed down. So this is ideal. Rick, thank you very much for the time today.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much. That was Rick Stewart. He's a car guy from way back and tons of stories. Maybe we can have him on again. Rick is actually a member of the Pharoahs Car Club, and the Pharoahs have been very generous with suggesting members that could come on the Auto-Biography podcast. And they're actually the oldest car club out there, 75 years next year. So looking forward to hearing from more members like this one.
Probably the most recent one, I've taken a 2008 Volkswagen Beetle.
Pumping the brakes a bit to tell you about the Beetle from Volkswagen. The new Beetle that we're talking about right now was built from 1997 to 2011. However, the very first one started production in 1938, originally commissioned by Adolf. Never mind. 57. 57 is actually the record for people that fit in a Beetle at one time. And this is pretty cool too. I found out that Volkswagen had a policy for a while. If you were a baby who was born in a Volkswagen Beetle, Volkswagen would give you a savings bond. And I hope they'd actually give that mother a medal as well.
Took the 2.5-liter gas engine out and converted it to a full electric. This thing started off as a retirement project. I retired from the automotive parts industry here in the last year, and this is supposed to give me a project to keep me busy for the next few years. And I kind of wrapped it up in about 6 months. I researched a lot on lithium batteries and what the best solution was, right? Instead of tabbing together a whole pile of the small lithium batteries, I actually found a used battery pack out of a Chevy Volt and disassembled it. It's, I think, a 365-volt battery originally, and basically modified it into 314-volt packs, hooked them in parallel, and lots of wiring, lots of learning, but you know what? Overall, it went pretty quick, and really thrilled with the results. Like, this thing gets about 200 kilometers on a charge. It's not fantastic, but you know what? For a commuter car in the mountains too, it's actually pretty good. And the charge takes works out to about a penny a kilometer to drive this thing.
Oh,
So it's, yeah, very affordable, and it goes really well. It's geared a little bit on the tall side. It hasn't got a pile of torque off the line, but it gets up and goes. But I've had up to 160, 170k like nothing. There's still lots of throttle left in it.
in the car clubs and the other enthusiasts like yourself, what's the general opinion of electric vehicles? Do most people say, hey, cool, or is there still a lot of arm crossing?
Yeah, you know what? Everybody that's seen this thing is really impressed with it, and I like horsepower too. I've had my share of rear engine dragsters and motorcycles and and you name it, right? And I've restored quite a few vehicles over the years. I guess the first thing I ever worked on was like 14 years old. I put a 302 in. A buddy of mine bought a Dodge Colt, and he wasn't happy with the four-cylinder engine, so we put a 302 into it. That was my.
How did that turn out?
Yeah, it turned out well, actually. It's still running around Saskatoon somewhere, I think.
Oh, my God. So a Colt is this teeny tiny little Dodge, and a 302 is a Ford V8. So.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was a bit of a shoehorn fit. So.
Take off the fenders to change the plug sort of situation.
Yeah, well, there wasn't even any fenders. Like that thing was unibody on the front, so it was just everything was ugly. But it was yeah, it was pretty tight getting in.
Well, it can't be too ugly when everything's a blur, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's good. I guess the first thing I actually did, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. A friend of mine, Dwayne Rossler in Saskatoon. We started making go-karts, and I guess that was our first thing. We taught ourselves how to weld and start figuring things out back then. So we were ripping around the neighborhoods and our stretched out go-karts.
Very cool. Well, Rod, thank you very much for the time today.
Yeah, absolutely, Blake. No, it's been great.
Hey, that's mad inventor and muscle car guy, Rod Newlove, again from the Pharoahs Car Club. So thanks a lot to Pharoahs for suggesting members, and I hope to have many more. I hope you'll be here for many more as well. If you have a story, I'd love to hear it from you. This is the Auto-Biography podcast, part of the Communal Creative Studios network of podcasts. We're having a ball with it too. So back with more soon. Until then, keep your wheels on the road and a tarp on your load.